Hey guys, and welcome to Mix Up Sports on this Friday afternoon, March 4th, 2016. Shout out to my cousin, happy birthday, by the way. A lot of news happening. Before I get into it, though, welcome along Nick Sexton. How you doing?
Doing good.
Frankie can't make it today, but we'll still go on with the show, and he'll be back for the next one. Anyways, to start off the news, a lot going on in the NFL. We're gonna start off there. Speaking of which, Roddy White was released. Arian Foster, Mario Williams, just a couple of the guys released, along with franchise tags, along with Josh Norman, Von Miller, Eric Berry. But we want to focus right now on Kirk Cousins, who got a franchise tag from the Redskins worth $19.95 million. For the Redskins, I I feel like he didn't really prove to be a great quarterback. Yeah, he had a good year, but he's not a great quarterback. They didn't beat a team over 500, which, if you're paying a guy that much money, you would want him to at least lead your team to a decent record. Granted, they made the playoffs, but let's face it, it was the NFC East division. I mean, was it really division last year? So for me, if they need a guy that badly, sure, go with him. But he's not a he's not a great quarterback.
I mean, with them making these moves for their quarterbacks, it's almost like a set of precedents that they're going to overspend for a quarterback. You go to when they drafted RG3, they traded something like two first-round picks and other assets to get the second overall pick, and look where that panned out. Now Kirk Cousins is the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL this year, and I mean, he doesn't play like that. It seems as though he's a good quarterback and he's a serviceable quarterback, but even if you're desperate for a quarterback, you can't pay him 20 million a year for this. I've heard reports that that's what he wanted for a long-term deal was 20 million. The Redskins offered him 19 million and he still wasn't happy with that. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the Redskins are thinking giving him this much money, because he's just not going to back it up, and he's going to be a bust for what a quarterback of this contract would, or at least for this high of a salary, would perform.
I feel as if I need to say this, but in the words of Kirk Cousins, I'm sure he likes that. You like that? I mean, sure, he likes that deal for him. Obviously he wants as much money. That this is essentially a career and a job for these players, regardless if we want to talk about legacy and records and having that overall that household name.
Yeah, I mean, it's granted he wasn't leading an amazing team, but he had Jordan Reed with him. He had Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garcon. They had their fullback Daryl Young. I mean, they have a decent enough passing attack alongside him, but he really should be doing better with the players that he has before him. So I feel like this is almost an issue of that they're scared that they're not going to be able to find another quarterback, and so they're trying to lock him down, even though it's going to bite them in the butt, really, because they're not going to have any cap space later on when they really want to sign a quarterback that they need to.
Essentially, if you think about it, my first option would have been, you hear Peyton Manning, he possibly might be leaving Denver if he decides to play another, game. That could be a pickup. However, I understand maybe you want to go with a younger guy, hopefully nurture him and make him a better quarterback so you can hear him constantly yelling in the press. You like that, you like that. Um, it's one of those things where I'm like, you want a decent quarterback to lead a team. You want someone who's a captain. You want that Tom Brady for your team. You want that Aaron Rodgers. And I don't see Kirk Cousins being that. I feel like this is a year fix that they're just trying to, we're gonna be okay this year. Let's focus on next year maybe. Granted, they didn't have a backup, because RG3 is out of Washington. He's no longer going to be there. For me, though, I feel like they put way too much into this guy for the lack of skill that he has. He was good, but he didn't lead them to any wins. Like we talked about it before the Super Bowl, they didn't win any game. They didn't beat any team over 500. The NFC East division was laughable. Granted, you have Eli Manning in that division. You have Tony Romo, but he was injured. But still, I don't feel like Kirk Cousins is going to be able to compete and be worth the money that they're giving him.
I mean, you mentioned some of the household quarterback names like Aaron Rodgers, even Cam Newton, and all those great quarterbacks. And this salary is saying that Kirk Cousins theoretically would is better than all those guys, which
No,
I'm
no, he's
sorry,
not.
but he's not better than Aaron Rodgers or Cam Newton. It's just he had a decent year and they had an easy schedule, and so obviously he's going to succeed with what's put before him with the team he has and the opponents they face. Anytime he came up against a good defense, they wouldn't win. Anytime they came up against a good team, they wouldn't win. And so, I mean, it seems like a dumb move by the Redskins and one that's going to be questioned all throughout next year, just because of the expectations that this contract would give him to perform at that standard for next season, which it's just not realistic to see Kirk Cousins do that. I'm sorry.
I agree with you 110%. I figured that, still give him a contract because, like I said, he's still a good quarterback. He's not great. Like we said, he's not any of the household names. Give him a small contract and possibly use that towards a better receiving core. They have Garcon, who's essentially going to be a veteran, and you got Deshaun Jackson, who's pretty much speed. With that being stated, you can look into the free agency, with Roddy White just now being released. Granted, he's still a veteran. You got, they still have players like Alfred up and play a better role. But for me, this wasn't the best pick. This wasn't the best choice for Redskins. However, I'm sure for Kirk Cousins, he's loving the big old check he's getting. But for other teams, though, for other teams such as Panthers franchise tagging Josh Norman or Broncos franchising Von Miller, I agree with both of those. They both played up to extremely great amounts this season. Both leading their team to a Super Bowl. They're both defensive players. They both stepped up, both in contract year. Von Miller and essentially being the Super Bowl MVP. Even Eric Berry, who the year prior was bedridden with cancer, and he's coming back now, and he's making money, being franchise tag, being the comeback player of the year. Those three I can agree with. I don't agree with this one.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Von Miller on that Broncos defense, and it's going to be interesting for the Broncos because you got the story that seems like it might take a Brett Favre turn with Peyton Manning, where everyone thinks he's going to retire, but he's looking to play another year. And we all expect him to retire at some point, but it's just not happening, it seems. And then you have Brock Osweiler, who he was in a contract year, and they couldn't re-sign him, so they're going to have to look to keep him in free agency. You got Malik Jackson, who is a great defensive end for him, putting pressure on the quarterback alongside Von Miller. And Dan Trevathan, their middle linebacker, who had a great year. All those guys are free agents now that the Broncos are going to have to try and figure out some way to keep all those guys, or else we can see I'd expect to see, one of those epic collapses that the Ravens went through and all their players got absolutely raided after the Ravens won that Super Bowl. I mean, it's going to be tough for the Broncos to keep this defense together.
And I agree with you 100%. It's going to be extremely hard, especially when these guys playing so well that they're going to want more and more money. Von Miller obviously is going to deserve, after this franchise tag, I see him getting a max deal down the road. Essentially, he's going to be a J.J. Watt, where he has this huge, I can't even say J.J. Watt because, Dominican Sue, he has the highest paying defensive player contract, correct, for Miami?
Yeah, he got paid in free agency. I'll say that much.
Yeah, essentially, he's going to be one of those guys. And, Josh Norman, this season, he was a shutdown corner. He stepped up. He made plays. Granted, I feel like every player who's in their contract year does so much to look like they deserve all this stuff. And granted, these players do. Without a doubt, they all, for each of their respective teams, they both deserve it. Or all three of them, especially. But like I said, Von Miller, I don't see the Broncos keeping their entire defense together simply because of these contracts that are going to be costly. You said Trevathan, you said maybe Von Miller, you said all those guys, and it's going to be hard to keep a core defense together when they're all going to want more money. Granted, they use their franchise tag on Von Miller, which 110% I agree with. But yeah, I agree with those things. Josh Norman, like I said, shutdown corner. Eric Berry for Kansas City. He like I said, comeback player. He deserves it. But But do you think that also these free agents? Do you think instead of re-signing their old guys, they go into free agency and look at a guy like Mario Williams released by Buffalo, and go, we want him, or even for offense, Roddy White or Arian Foster, they were both released. Roddy White leads touchdown catches and receiving yards for Falcons, and then Arian Foster, who's just an elite running back, but injury ridden. Do you see any of these guys being picked up to any teams that can't necessarily fulfill contract obligations?
I mean, for Roddy White and Arian Foster, it would make sense to go to Denver because they're veterans that it would help right now, maybe not even next year, but right now. And that's what the Broncos need. They're pushing for another championship, trying to go, as Drake would say, back to back. But but they're pushing for another championship. They need veterans on this team to fill some of those holes. And I mean, Mario Williams, maybe not in Denver. I don't think he fits their scheme really, but he can be a productive pass rusher given the correct scheme. And where Williams will fall, I'm not sure. Both White and Foster had less than great years. I'll say that, with Roddy White, I believe, having one of the worst years of his career.
Well, Mario Williams had the same thing. He was just non-existent at all this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what teams, may take a flyer on them. But also in free agency, you got Doug Martin, who the Tampa Bay Buccaneers decided not to franchise tag.
Oh,
and
wow.
so if they can't get barring a last-minute deal with the Buccaneers, Doug Martin's a free agent now. And so even though he was the number 2, the second best rusher in the NFL from a rushing yard standpoint, I can guarantee you he'll get paid by someone, whether that'll be the Bucks or another team looking for a running back. He'll definitely get paid if Byron Maxwell can get that huge contract he did. Doug Martin can get a nice, sizable contract.
Well, yeah, he obviously deserved it, teams. I feel that for the guys that we listed off, as such as Roddy Wright, Mario Williams, I see maybe Tennessee picking them up because Tennessee has essentially no one except for Delaney Walker in the receiving core, and he's a tight end, so he's blocking 40% of the time. I feel like he'd be a good pickup there. Arian Foster could even go to Chicago, where they just give up Matt Forte. I mean, granted, they still have Langford, but still, that could be a good place for him to end up. Mario Williams, I still feel like Tennessee would be a good pickup for him. Even Tampa Bay, you got maybe even New York Giants, because they were the worst rushing defense in the league. Maybe that's a good place for him to end up. Overall, though, these are a lot of big names, and we also had one a couple hours ago. Leodis McKelvin was released by Buffalo Bills. He's a defensive back. So Buffalo Bills are obviously taking this free agency very strongly by game rate players, and hopefully picking some back up. Starting with obviously Rex Ryan's brother as a assistant coach. But it's always exciting for NFL to see all these players move on or just kicked out because they can't theoretically have the contract, or they just need cap space. And that's essentially what this league is. If you don't want to pay a guy and you need the money, just cut him. It's a lot of these players are great players. Like I said, Doug Martin, I'm surprised was not picked up or franchise tag, because obviously that would have been my first move, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think if the Buccaneers can't get him in free agency, they definitely made a mistake. They should have franchise tagged him, in my opinion.
Now, I have a question for you. Sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah,
if they don't pick up Doug Martin, do they go for someone like Matt Forte or Arian Foster?
I mean, they could go that route, but I think they might go for someone in the draft even to try and replace Doug Martin with how productive he was. They have Bobby Rainey, who was he was a nice third down back for him, and they might want to test him as an every down back. I don't know how well that'll work out. I think they could pick up someone like you mentioned with like Arian Foster, or someone like that, where he can be the workhorse for a team. And another interesting one for the Dolphins is they franchise tagged Olivier Vernon, who was one of the best pass rushers in the NFL last season, but that left Lamar Miller, the Dolphins running back, to hit free agency, which he just didn't get the recognition really in Miami. I mean, they really didn't use him as that running back that'll take 200 carries a season and he'll be the number one running back. They didn't really go to him that often. I think that if he could even be an option for the Buccaneers at this point. I mean, he's he's a great running back, and really just the Dolphins didn't really use him correctly until this last year, and unfortunately, they used him a little too late.
Yeah, I still think though, he's a great player, Lamar Miller. He's always someone I was always scared to go up against in fantasy, but at the same time was happy about because he was a hit or miss because like you said the Dolphins didn't use him correctly or just didn't. He wasn't really a featured guy that was talked about most. When you talk about big name running backs, you think of who? You think of Peterson, you think of Martin even, you think of Lynch. Well, he's retired now, but you still think of all these guys. You don't think of Lamar Miller, but he was still one of those. He was an underrated running back who deserved to be on a team and even be picked up. But obviously, Dolphins didn't do that. But they used a franchise tag for somebody else. I still think that he'll end up somewhere. I don't think he'll stay with Miami. For Doug Martin's case, I feel like he'll make a deal with the Bucks. It just for some reason I don't feel like he would leave that with the whole Jameis Winston going to be rising up a better quarterback. They still have a great team. I just feel like they need to put the puzzles together and figure out what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, if the Bucks can get Martin back, that'll definitely be helpful. They'll lock him down for quite a few years, I'd expect. And one more signing that was interesting was Joe Flacco got a 3-year contract extension worth $66.4 million, taking him through the 2021 season, and a signing bonus of $40 million. And $44 million of the $66 million is guaranteed. I mean, Joe Flacco, he's a great quarterback, but he's not this great of a quarterback to deserve that deal. I'm sorry, but I don't think that he deserved this deal.
I feel that this stems back from them winning the Super Bowl years ago. I feel like it was. I say years ago as if it was a while ago, but it was back when Ray Lewis was still in the league. The fact when they won it, he's been getting these contracts ever since. I don't think he's an elite quarterback. He's better than Kirk Cousins, so we just got that $19 million plus deal. But I don't I agree with you 100%. I don't think that he's a great quarterback to be deserving that. You said $40 million guaranteed plus a $40 million sign-on bonus?
Yeah, $40 million guaranteed out of $66.4 million with a $40 million signing bonus over 3 years.
So that's essentially an $80 million guaranteed contract just with the bonus and what's guaranteed. It's ridiculous to see what these players are getting. I mean, in this league, I guess if you're mediocre and you're on a team that's not so good, you'll get the big deals. I mean, that's essentially what it is. Baltimore wasn't the greatest last year. Flacco went out with was it ACL or was it MCL tear?
I think it was his ACL.
Oh, yeah. Essentially, but he still went out for set with the broken elbow. Ray Rice a couple years with his issue, losing Ray Lewis. Like you said, their entire defense falling apart. I guess they're just trying to hold on to what they think can lead them to a good a Super Bowl, at least a chance at the Super Bowl, if not a chance at playoffs. I mean, that's all they really got to go for. I mean, who is their backup? That's the point. No one knows. No one really looks at it and goes, we'll be all right, because they don't know. Joe Flacco essentially is their number one guy, and if it works for them, great. I just don't think that he's worth $80 million guaranteed money.
I mean, we're seeing this sort of become a trend of recent years with overpaying players. I mean, I've mentioned it before with Byron Maxwell going to the Eagles for the ridiculous contract he signed, and he didn't perform. You see these inflated contracts for players that simply won't perform because they need to fill a need. And it'll be interesting to see this year with, Alshon Jeffrey, Josh Norman, and those type of players that would have been the top free agents in their respective positions. Now, they're staying in on their teams, and they have to, teams that have that need of either a wide receiver or a cornerback are going to have to find another player that no doubt they'll overpay just to kind of fill that need. And I mean, it'll definitely be interesting to see who that guy is this year.
So essentially in the league, it's pretty much a deal with this situation now, work on it later. Let's fix the now and then let our future selves work on the problem. With that being said, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go away.